Next, from Springfield, we talked to Matt Hart, Executive Director of the Illinois Trucking Association, about legislation affecting the trucking industry, the size and scale of Illinois' trucking industry, the shortage of truck drivers in America, and the opportunities and financial benefits one can find in the business. This runs about 25 minutes.
Matt Hart with the Illinois Trucking Association. Thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Great, glad to be here, Terry. Thanks.
We wanted to talk to you in this legislative session about some of the changes going on in the trucking industry and some of the changes that your association wants to have made. One of the bills going through the legislature is SB 662 that has to do with Illinois trucking license fees. What is it and why would you be supporting it?
Sure. Well, Terry, Illinois has the 5th highest license plate registration cost in the nation, 5th highest in the nation, just to put a license plate on the front of a truck. And more importantly, they became extremely high in around 2003, 2004, when we created a new fee in Illinois called the commercial distribution fee. The commercial distribution fee, or CDF, amounts to a percentage sales tax on the cost of putting a license plate on any commercial vehicle. And when we say any commercial vehicle, it's not only the semis that you see going up and down the highway, but it goes all the way down to the heavy-duty pickup trucks that landscapers and construction workers use, all the way down to what's known as a D plate. But every single one of those license plates has a percentage sales tax applied to it.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
When you say that, is that just when it's bought or is that a yearly fee?
Every year when you renew your license plate, that fee is paid. It's not spelled out on your bill from the Illinois Secretary of State. You just see the dollar amount. But inside of there is a percentage commercial distribution fee that is collected by the Illinois Secretary of State. And then all of that money from the CDF fee is then swept over to the General Revenue Fund. It does not go to the Illinois Secretary of State, does not go to the Road Fund, does not go to State Police. It entirely props up the General Revenue Fund for the state of Illinois. And when they initially passed the commercial distribution fee, which took effect in 2004, it was a 36% sales tax on truck license plates. Now for a semi going up and down the highway, that took their cost from $2,790 to almost $4,000. It was $1,000 per truck per year extra that we were paying on our license plate fees, and all of that money was going into the General Revenue Fund. We immediately lost tens of thousands of trucks. We lost thousands of trucking companies in the years that followed.
When you say you lost them, you mean what?
They moved. The trucking companies moved. A lot of them moved to Indiana. The state of Indiana gained, in the years after the commercial distribution fee was passed, the state of Indiana went from about 100,000 international registration plan trucks or interstate trucks, if you will, that were registered. They went from about 100,000 trucks to over 200,000 trucks. Now, we know Indiana didn't double the number of their trucks in their state. A lot of those were trucking companies that just said, you know what, we're going to do everything that we can to keep our business in Indiana and run the same miles in Illinois, but we're going to base our trucks out of our terminals in Indiana. So after we lost all of these trucks, the General Assembly came back and they said, okay, maybe 36% was too much. And so they reduced the commercial distribution fee, and over the next couple of years, they reduced it to 14.35%, but that's where it still stands today. So right now, everybody who buys a license plate from the Illinois Secretary of State, every year built into that price, there's a 14.35% sales tax on the basis of that plate, and all that money is collected by the Secretary of State, and it is sent to the General Revenue Fund every year.
So when you say 14.35%, that's a percent of what? Is that based upon the percent of what the license fee is?
Correct. For example, the heavier plates, the semis that you see going up and down the highway, the basis for that license plate is $2,790. $2,790.
And they attach then the 14.35% on top of that.
Correct.
How would that percentage compare to Indiana?
Indiana's registration costs overall, our costs are about 79% higher than the state of Indiana. We're much higher than all of our surrounding states. We're about 86% higher than Missouri and Iowa. We are 23% higher than Wisconsin. We're about 46% higher than Kentucky, just to put a license plate on the front of that vehicle.
And as you said, you already lost a number of trucking companies, moved their vehicles to and their facilities to other states. So on one hand, by raising that tax, arguably Illinois is getting even less money because they're not collecting it.
Exactly. I'll use, this is a real world example. We had a trucking company in eastern Illinois that moved 17 miles to the east, but into the state of Indiana. They had 100 trucks in their fleet. They moved their entire operation into the state of Indiana. Now, overall, they're not saving that much money on their license plates because they're still running the same miles in Illinois. But they now employ 100 people in the state of Indiana, and they're buying all their tires in Indiana. They're buying all their fuel in Indiana. Their employees are not paying Illinois income tax. Now they're citizens of Indiana and paying Indiana income tax. So that's just one example of how it all filters down when we don't keep businesses in Illinois, and we want to make Illinois we are a crossroads of the nation for transportation. 70% of our goods in this country travel by truck. So why shouldn't we do everything we can to create as many businesses in Illinois and create as many trucking company opportunities in Illinois?
What about the argument, and you've probably heard this, people would say, who would be against lowering the tax, that the truckers don't pay that, they're just going to build it into the cost of their freight, and so why should the truckers care, since they just disperse that cost across a broad swath of clients?
Yeah. Well, we care for a couple reasons. Number one, we care just because we do want to keep costs as low as possible, and we want to be competitive with other states. And when you've got other states like when it's 79% higher than Indiana, that's a little bit. We're not 10% or 20% higher. We're almost 80% higher than Indiana's registration costs. We're trying to be competitive with other states. In the manufacturing plants that we serve, we want to keep them competitive as well. The retailers that we serve, we want to keep them competitive as well. So it does all filter down. But coming back to the commercial distribution fee, the commercial distribution fee is a fee that's placed on our industry that doesn't impact our industry. It all goes to the general revenue fund. We believe in paying fees, and we believe in paying taxes. We're supportive of motor fuel taxes that fund our roads and fund our infrastructure. But those are fees that are collected by the trucking industry, and they go to benefit the roadways that we use to deliver America's goods. The CDF does not. All the money from the commercial distribution fee goes to the general revenue fund. It does not go to trucking. It doesn't go to the agencies that help trucking. And so we think that if we are going to have fees in place on certain industries, that they should be going for purposes in support of those industries.
That was passed under Governor Blagojevich, who has no fans on either side of the aisle, let's say. But one of the things that Governor Rauner has said while he was running is he wants to create a better business climate for Illinois. One would expect that he would be more sympathetic to your cries for relief. Have you talked to anyone in the administration, and if so, are they going to be backing your effort?
We've certainly been talking. We've talked from the moment we met with then candidate Rauner in our Springfield office back last May, and again when he spoke at our annual meeting in September. Absolutely, we brought up the need to repeal the commercial distribution fee. I also had the ability to sit on Governor Rauner's infrastructure committee for his transition team, and we continue to bring it up then as well. That we've had this commercial distribution fee in place a long time. It's time to repeal the commercial distribution fee. Now that Rauner has taken office, we're continuing to try and hopefully repeal that fee, or at least reduce it or phase it out. But we're certainly working with the governor's folks. We're working with the Senate. And we're working with the House, hoping that we can get an elimination or a reduction or gradual elimination of the commercial distribution fee.
Who's sponsoring the bill for you in the Senate?
In the Senate, Martin Sandoval, who's the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, whose district includes Chicago and some areas.
By the way, he's a Democrat, in case people don't know.
Yeah. Sure.
So if the Republicans, and then you have, I presume you have some bipartisan support?
We do. We actually have bipartisan, bicameral support for this bill. In the Senate, Senate Bill 662, as I said, Martin Sandoval is our chief co-sponsor. State Senator Pam Altoff is also joined on as a chief co-sponsor. And as of this moment, we've also added Dave Kaler from Peoria. We've added Sam McCann from downstate. And John Sullivan have also joined on in support of Senate Bill 662 as well. And then over in the House, we have got support as well. Our House version is House Bill 371, and that's a bill that is sponsored by State Representative Rita Mayfield as well as State Representative David Rice, a Democrat and Republican respectively. So we do have support in both chambers and on both sides of the aisle.
Aside, for those who haven't lobbied before, do you grab any lawmaker, or do you start with just those on the appropriate committees?
Well, right now we're certainly working on the appropriate committees because as the legislative process works, we have to keep this bill and get it through the committee process. So we've been in contact to this point with almost nearly every member of the Senate Revenue Committee, which is where Senate Bill 662 is currently sitting.
Do you hear concerns? Obviously, Illinois is in deep financial trouble, and revenue is one of the issues of revenue and expending. We're out of whack with too much spending relative to revenue. What do you say to people who say, Matt, how can we afford to lose any revenue right now?
Well, I guess our response to that is, you know what, in the long term, we think the state's going to win, because if we can lower the cost of operation for trucking companies in the state, we're going to have more trucking companies here. But that's also going to filter down to, it's going to be more cost effective for our manufacturers that are here, our retailers that are here, our warehousing that's here, and that's going to lead to more jobs, which eventually the state will get that money in collecting revenue from the income tax and sales tax from those folks as we grow business. If we can improve that broad base of taxpayers, whether they're businesses or individuals, we think lowering the cost of operation for business in the state is a good thing.
Have you talked to any trucking firms to say, if you lowered that, we'd be happy to move back in? I mean, or would this have to be organic growth from new firms starting up?
You know, there was so much damage done to the trucking industry early on in the Blagojevich administration. They also, when we passed the commercial distribution fee, they also greatly scaled back the rolling stock sales tax exemptions that help provide an incentive for trucking companies to be in Illinois. Also, since then, workers' compensation costs have skyrocketed for trucking companies.
And that was the other question I was going to say. One of the big issues is workman's comp, and one of the issues you often hear from those in the business community say that causation, that people would think that you have to be hurt on the job to get workman's comp insurance, but in Illinois that's not the case.
Right. You know,
where would that be as an issue? How big of an issue is workman's comp vis-a-vis the
for
CDF?
workers' comp, I think if you spoke to our members and you spoke to a lot of trucking companies, workers' comp would be right there with the commercial distribution fee. For some folks, it's even higher because their costs are so high. Again, in trying to be competitive with surrounding states, it's very hard for us to compete when states like Indiana have workers' comp rates, and we have workers' comp rates, and our work comp rates for a truck driver are 300% higher than the state of Indiana. You know, when you're sitting there and you're trying to decide where you're going to locate your trucking company, are you going to locate in Illinois, or are you going to locate in Indiana, and you start looking at the costs of workers' compensation coverage for your payroll for truck drivers, Indiana makes it very hard for us to compete when they have such lower rates.
For certainly a big one. I mean, I guess if you have a smaller distribution area and you're servicing something in the middle of the state, you're not going to be located outside the state because your client base isn't there. But do you know dollar-wise how much more when you say 300%? Is there a way to say for every truck driver it costs X number of dollars more, or is that?
Well, I do know there are rates out there for workers' compensation based on payroll, and we have seen those figures, and they're ranging anywhere from 200 to 300% higher in Illinois to cover the same employee. I'll give you a real-world example where the rubber meets the road in this. We've had a lot of members who have terminals all over the country, and one of our members who is an Illinois company has terminals in Chicago, has terminals downstate, has terminals in other parts of the country, including Indianapolis, and they have told me that all of their hiring they do out of Indiana, mainly because it helps them to hedge against their workers' compensation costs for paying for truck drivers. And we don't, we think everyone should be covered, and we think that workers' compensation should be in place. But at the same time, too, we have to stay competitive with surrounding states when it comes to the cost of workers' compensation. So we definitely think that there's a need to help improve the business climate for trucking companies and give us one more incentive for locating trucking companies here in Illinois.
Do we know how, in totality, how big is the trucking industry in the state?
Sure. Trucking employs about 270,000 people in the state of Illinois. That's 1 out of every 18 workers. So it's big. In our industry, about 80% of our workforce are truck drivers. So our truck drivers are an integral part of moving the goods that move across the state. And as I said earlier, 70% of our goods in this country move by truck. And I know we talk about other modes of transportation, but a lot of people forget that the one thing about trucks is they can reach every single community in the state of Illinois. And there's other modes of transportation that just can't reach them. I mean, all modes work together, but at the end of the day, we're moving 70% of the nation's freight, which is more than double all the other modes combined.
And that would include just things we pick up at the grocery store. I mean, we
Absolutely.
sometimes think manufacturing products, but
Sure.
it's just literally almost everything.
Yeah, the gasoline that you put in your gas tank, all the food at the grocery store, the clothes that we buy at the department stores, the food that gets to the restaurants when we go to the restaurants, even when we build the roads, the gravel and asphalt and concrete, that all gets delivered by truck. So trucking's vital to our nation, and it's vital to lives of Americans every day.
Just a couple last questions. One, speaking of roads, is that an issue? How are Illinois roads compared to other states? Or is our road infrastructure where it should be, or is that a cause of concern for you?
No, we certainly we think we're long overdue for improving our roads in the state, especially around the Chicago area. We've got a lot of congestion. Congestion costs our industry a lot of money, and along those lines, our costs keep going up. The Illinois Tollway, we're in the middle of a 60% toll increase on trucks that's being phased in over 3 years. We're in the first year of a 3-year phase, and so our costs are going up there, but we do think that the time is right for us to invest in Illinois infrastructure. We prefer that investment come through the motor fuel tax, the collection of the motor fuel tax. I know there's other alternatives that are being floated around in Springfield this year, but the motor fuel tax that is paid is still one of the most efficient sources of revenue for funding infrastructure. About 99 cents out of every dollar that is collected in the motor fuel tax ends up going to roads and bridges. So we think that's one of the best alternatives to fund our infrastructure. We certainly support, the Illinois Trucking Association does support a motor fuel tax increase, as long as that money goes to roads and bridges.
That was exactly going to be my next question, because there's talk about raising the motor fuel tax nationwide. And I was going to ask, what is the consensus? You talk to your counterparts in other states. What do they think about that?
I think most states, not all, but most states, I think, are supportive of a motor fuel tax increase. I do believe Iowa just passed theirs, I think, yesterday. Iowa is raising their cents per gallon motor fuel tax by 10 cents a gallon on gasoline and 10 cents a gallon on diesel. There's been several other states that have either done the cents per gallon increase or have done different variations of that over the last couple of years. So we know that the states are beginning to do it. We're actually heading to Washington, D.C. next week, the Illinois Trucking Association, to continue to let our federal legislators know that the time has come to raise the user fees and improve our infrastructure in this nation.
What kind of cost what are you supporting in terms of raising it?
We don't have an amount, just so long as our main concern is that whatever amount is raised, that money goes to roads and bridges. And we'll have the fight year in and year out, budget by budget, to make sure that the money stays in the roads. That's just something that we have to do at the Illinois Trucking Association. But we do think that the best alternative, when you look at all the alternatives that are out there for increasing revenues to pay for roads and bridges, the motor fuel tax is still the best alternative out there.
And lastly, interesting when we talk about high unemployment that we've had over the last 10 years. It's come down, obviously, but one of the problems that American industry in general is going to be facing over the next 20 years is the retirement of the baby boom. Mm-hmm. And there's not, in some industries, enough people in the pipeline mm-hmm. to come in to fill those positions. One, is that a problem in the trucking industry? And two, what kind of, if there is an average or a representative income, mm-hmm. these are blue-collar jobs, but on the other hand, one that I would say a blue-collar job where one can, I think, I'm not sure, make a pretty good salary.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely. We call it a driver shortage. We have a driver shortage in this country. We estimate that we need about 100,000 new truck drivers per year just to keep up with our
nationwide.
Current demand. Nationwide, we need 100,000 new truck drivers every year to replace our aging workforce. You can walk into just about any trucking company today, and if you were to take a poll of the average age of their drivers, it's going to be somewhere in the 50s. And these are folks that we know are going to be retiring soon. But But that is our, and every year we actually take a list, we poll our trucking company members and our driver members and ask them what's their number one issue. Right now the number one issue is the driver shortage. It's something that has to be addressed, and we're doing everything we can to try and incentivize folks to go and work in the trucking industry.
You talk to high school, I mean, when you look at, I know here just outside of Springfield, there's Lincoln Lake Community College actually has a truck driver school.
Yeah.
Are there other opportunities around the state? And yet we look at any number of communities where there's high unemployment.
Right.
How do you reach out to maybe incentivize some of those kids, or just say, hey, consider being a trucker?
We do that quite a bit. We have a big event that one of our members hosts down in Southern Illinois called Traffic Safety Days. And our safety director goes down there and talks about the trucking industry and the opportunities for the trucking industry. The one challenge for us in going after the high school age kids is what you cannot do is you cannot drive a truck across state lines until you're 21 years old. That's because of federal laws. So a lot of times when we're going after a driver pool or a potential driver, we can't really go after the 18-year-old kid because we can't put them in a truck and have them drive to Indianapolis at 18 years old. You know, if we can keep them around by the time they're in their mid-20s, they can do that. So, but the opportunities are great. The one thing about the trucking industry is, you know, there are a lot of people who own very successful trucking companies today that started as a truck driver. They started as a truck driver, just driving for someone, and they built up cash and they saved money, and they went and they bought, and then they finally bought a truck. And then after they bought a truck, they leased on someone else to work in their business, and they grew their business to a company where now they've got 10 trucks or 20 trucks or 100 trucks just because they started as a truck driver. And the opportunities are limitless when it comes to working in the trucking industry. And that's one of the great things about the trucking industry is just about anybody can make it on their own as long as they're willing to work hard and be safe and deliver the goods that Americans want.
And as far as training, I guess it all depends what you're driving. There could be something like a UPS truck, let's say, a smaller one, or there could be the, what is it, the 18-wheeler. If you're driving the 18-wheeler, does it necessarily mean that you make more money if you're driving one of those big rigs versus a smaller one? And if you want to drive those big rigs, see the country by driving across it, how long does it take to become competent driving one of those?
Well, that all depends on the industries that you're working on, but you're right. Obviously, it's much easier to drive a package delivery truck or a straight truck as opposed to driving what we call longer combination vehicles or the semis that you see out there. But again, the pay, you know, comes. There's a reward too, and folks that are willing to be gone, you know, overnight, willing to be gone for, you know, days at a time or weeks at a time. Those folks, you know, take a little bit more risk, but there's a little bit more reward for long haul truck drivers. It's not uncommon for us to have members that pay long haul truck drivers 6 figures, because if they're very good at what they do and they're very safe at what they do, they can certainly make a lot of money in this industry.
All right. Matt Hart, we appreciate you taking time to talk to us.
Thanks, Terry.
Thank you.